Okay, so a few minutes after schedule, but technical difficulties seem to be over. So welcome to the Planning Commission meeting for the 15th of January, 2025. It looks like we have a quorum of planning commissioners. We have Ian, Rebecca. Hi, Rebecca.
Hello.
Mark, Allison, Chris, and myself, and we have a couple of guests, it looks like. So we have one studio guest here, a couple of Zoom guests. So welcome, everybody. We're going to start by taking a quick look at the agenda, which is a little bit complicated, but hopefully we can get through it. We have a couple of items on this agenda. The main item is the public hearing for the flood hazard overlay district. We had added a couple of definitions at the end of that, which we would like to actually.
Virginia, I can't hear you.
Oh, jeez. Out there.
Hello.
Hello, can you hear?
Now I can.
Okay. All right, so you didn't hear what I said before, right? Anyway,
No.
any questions about the agenda? Anyone want to change the agenda from the published one? All right, I'm not seeing any hands or hearing any comments. So just let me know if you hear me. Stop hearing me.
We're having some technical difficulties for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to have public comment now on any non-agenda items, since we've determined that this agenda is the one we're following. Any public comment on non-agenda items? I'm assuming everyone has looked at the agenda. All right, not hearing any comment, we'll move on to number 4 on our agenda, review the minutes of the 12/4/24 meeting. Are there any additions or comments that anyone wants to make about those minutes all that way ago, 12/4/24? Comments, additions? Okay, not hearing any. We will accept those minutes as written into the record. Okay, now we'll move on to our substantive agenda. So this is just an item which came up since the agenda was put together. And there was some input from various places, including the Andrews Community Forest, from Max Krieger, who's on this meeting, the zoning administrator, that perhaps a broader discussion of trails and recreation path, whose definitions we had added to the flood hazard overlay district because they were tangentially relevant, but they're not essential for what we want to do with the flood hazard overlay district amendments. So we would like to, after we open the public hearing for the FHOD, to remove those definitions from the hearing and to schedule some future planning commission meeting, a more full discussion about trails and recreation paths. There's obviously interest in it, and there's been some controversy. So does anyone have anything they want to add to that or say about that? No. If anyone came just for that discussion, we would like to suggest that we put it off to have a more full discussion at some point in the future. Anybody have a problem with that?
It
I
looked
don't,
like,
oh.
go ahead.
I just think that I read the letter from the resident who wanted to dive a little deeper into the definitions, and I thought he was very thoughtful and
Can you speak up a little bit, Rebecca? We
It's-
can't
it's
hear you
us.
very well.
Oh.
It's us.
It's us? Okay, well, you'll just have to talk louder because we're not
okay.
doing well with
No,
the
I thought
sound.
the letter from the resident kind of outlining some of the nuances around all those definitions was interesting, and it made me think that there needs to be further discussion about it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
well, that was the general consensus and the flood hazard overlay district has been months in the works. So we wanted to really take the time at this meeting to take any comments about what we had arranged there and do this later. So if there's no other comments,
I was going to say essentially the same thing that Rebecca just did, but also note that Max Krieger is attending.
can you talk a little louder? I'm sorry, we can't hear you very well.
It's not you, Chris. It's
No,
us.
it's not you. It's
Yeah,
our speaker
okay.
system.
I was going to say that I agree with what Rebecca just said. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yep.
And note that Max Krieger is attending this meeting and invite him to add anything to his letter that he might like to.
You hear that?
No, I can't hear a thing.
Have you tried the little upward caret next to the audio? Sometimes you can switch what output it's going to.
This guy here?
Yeah, that guy. Sometimes, yeah, maybe you can tell it to go out to the speaker.
Yeah.
Oop.
We're just trying to work on our sound to make it a little bit louder.
How about now?
Chris, can you speak again so we can check the sound?
Sure. Testing, 1, 2, 3, testing. Okay. Shall I take it from the top?
Yes, please. If you would repeat what you said before, that'd be great.
I wanted to, first of all, support what Rebecca just said. That I think that she made a good point, and also note that Max Krieger is attending this meeting and invite him to add anything that he might like to the letter that he sent.
Okay. Great. Max, do you want to add anything quickly? I mean, we would like to not spend too much time on it, and we do have your letter.
Thanks very much. I'm Max Krieger, Richmond resident. The letter, I think, is a starting point. As other folks have said, I think there's a fair amount of nuance to discuss. And I'm more than happy to come back and or amass other resources as the commission would be interested in. But I just wanted to attend today to make sure that I was in attendance if it was voted that you did want to discuss it. So I'm happy to wait if that's more appropriate or expound. But I would like to participate in the discussion. I know there are other folks in the community that are interested as well.
Great. So I think we'll wait and have that full discussion when we have the full discussion.
It'll be warned properly.
Yeah, it'll be warned and that will be the topic of the discussion rather than an add-on. So anyway, thank you for bringing it to our attention. What?
I don't know if you want other people to speak on this or not.
Sure. Are there hands? I don't see
No,
any
no
hands.
hands.
Okay. All right, so I don't see any other hands. So I think we'll move on to the main topic of our public hearing, which is flood hazard overlay amendments. So what I would be looking for is a motion to open the public hearing from one of the commissioners.
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
Second,
Okay,
second,
Allison is seconding the motion. All right. Any discussion about that? About opening the hearing? All right, so let's vote on that. Yes?
Sorry, I didn't know if you needed to vote to amend your agenda or to officially make it. It's clear that the trail discussion is not going to occur today. I just want to make
Yes.
sure or else I will log off.
Yeah, Keith and I decided that it would be best to amend it from the public hearing. And
Okay.
so we're not going to have, we're going to have in a minute, when we've opened the public hearing, one of the commissioners will move that we remove
Okay.
the discussion and put it off later. Yep.
Apologies, didn't understand.
Yeah,
Thank you for
well, that's
clarifying.
okay. We went back and forth about where we should, make that motion.
We got you covered, Max. We won't talk about it today.
Appreciate it.
We
Thanks.
promise. All right, so we're going to vote now on whether we're going to open the public hearing on item number 6. All those in favor could raise your hand, please, so that we can see you, or speak up if we can't see your hand.
Mark.
Alex? Mark? Yes. Allison, are you voting aye? Mark?
Yes.
Okay. Allison, are you voting yes to open the
Yeah.
public hearing? She can't hear me. All right, well, we're going to have to go with Mark, Chris, Rebecca, Ian, and myself as ayes.
Couple of hands up.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So the public hearing is now open. And this public hearing, the topic of it is amendments to section 4.7, 4.8, 6.8, and 7. 7 is the definitions section. We still have one definition from the flood hazard overlay district. So we're still going to include section 7 definitions, but now that we have opened the public hearing, we can have a motion from a commissioner to strike from the hearing the definitions, recreation path, and trails. If anybody would like to make that motion.
Rebecca's hand is raised.
Oh, no, it's not. Sorry.
Would you like to make that that motion though, Rebecca, just to get into the swing of things?
Sure.
Okay. Strike rec path and trails. Rebecca makes the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Chris is seconding the motion. I am assuming there's no further discussion because we've already had the discussion. So all in favor of striking those two definitions should raise their hand or say aye if you don't have a hand to raise.
Aye.
Okay. Okay, great. Everybody's in favor. Okay, so we can take those off the plate. And we can proceed to a discussion of the flood hazard overlay district. So hopefully everybody read the memo. This came about through the Three Parks Commission committee wishing to consider moving some structures, namely the playground, the restroom, up onto the plateau to get them out of the main floodway, the main channel of the water during these floods, because it seems like it was happening quite often and there is expense and disruption associated with the damage that is done. The zoning prior to this work did not allow for it, as per our zoning administrator, did not allow for the movement of those structures up onto the plateau. So this work came about in order to allow that to happen. The technique that we took up was to use the nonconformity section, which is talking about things that exist already there in the floodway where the whole park is the floodway. So those structures would not likely be permitted today if they were requested to be built there, if they were attempted to be permitted there. So they're non-conforming, they're pre-existing, and we made some changes, some amendments to this overlay district to allow for the relocation from one portion of the floodway to another portion of the floodway. So that's the main thrust of this. I am assuming everybody has looked at the draft that we've made and the changes that we've made. Subsequently, let's see. Okay, can you read those? I can't read them from here.
No, that's good.
Okay,
Sorry,
so let me know if anything happens in the chat.
you got it.
So does anyone have anything that they'd like to say now about the proposal in front of you?
I do.
Chris?
Just briefly, I mean, I think this is a little bit of a fine edge to walk here. You know, we want to be able to, you know, maintain and repair and relocate as necessary those structures. But on the flip side, what we don't want to do is increase the liability to the town of a demonstrated frequent flooding hazard, you know, to the structures that are there. And I feel like the document as it drafted so far does a good job of giving us the flexibility we need. I guess I'm just raising the question, does it protect us on the liability side, you know, from, you know, a future select board for some reason or other building something that meets the letter of the law but is much more expensive, for example?
Well, I think the expense is a different question, and it's even, you know, it's even a question whether the select board is going to wish to spend the money to move these structures.
Right.
This is not really our job. The select board asked us to enable it if it was determined that that was what was wanted. So the Three Parks Committee, this is a plan that they are putting forth. Who is going to determine whether it's cost effective or very, you know, very expensive will not be us. It will be the select board and the Three Parks Committee, presumably. For instance, to move the restroom structure up onto the plateau and make it floodproof and, you know, usable on the plateau, and a whole new structure may be more than we want to do in terms of expense. It may be more cost expensive than cleaning it out every time. I mean, it's not really destroyed during the floods. It's just a mess.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think the expense question is a whole separate question. The question of the regulation still has to meet FEMA's requirements,
Right.
because the main point is that we do not want FEMA to say, your regulations don't meet our requirements, so you cannot have the insurance, the flood hazard insurance. The NFIP, the National Flood Insurance Program, is only available to towns where there are regulations and that are enforced, by the way, to protect the floodway and to reduce the cost of damages, which of course the insurance program doesn't want to pay for. So that was our main other concern, besides allowing the town to do what they wanted to do, or this committee to do what they wanted to do, was to be sure that we would continue, as we have with our previous floodplain ordinance, to have the NFIP available, the flood insurance available to the people who need it, who live in the floodplain, basically.
That's a much better way of framing it. Thank you. And are we confident of that at this point, of still qualifying for the MFIP?
So here's the story so far about our work with ensuring that. We sent the draft to ANR. So the Agency of Natural Resources has a department called the Department of Environmental Conservation. Within that department, they have flood managers, floodplain managers, whose job it is to advise towns on how they can best meet the FEMA requirements. They do not have the authority to say you can do this or you can't do that. Their job is to help towns, this is per them, what they say, is to help towns understand the regulations and do what is going to be acceptable to FEMA. So we spoke with both Kyle Medash and Ned Swanberg from this department in ANR. We have had several conversations with them. And as it says in my added memo, my addendum memo, they feel that there's nothing we want to do that would be a problem for FEMA, but they didn't like the language. They didn't like, for instance, the fact that we used the word structure in the way that we use it in our whole rest of our ordinance. They use it to refer to buildings, just buildings, basically. A structure is a building. Well, we have a structure being a much broader category. So, and the one thing that they thought was going to be a red flag or not acceptable to FEMA was our category of incidental structures, which, you know, the trash cans and the dog waste stations and picnic tables, those kinds of things. They were concerned that FEMA would call this not structures, but all development, and would not like it and would want it to be permitted. So Keith and I went through the checklist. So FEMA, to look at your ordinance, it has a checklist. It's called the NFIP checklist. We looked at the checklist that in 2023 was signed off on by regional planning, who also has a role in helping towns to make FEMA compliant regulations. So Dan Albrecht at regional planning went through the whole checklist. Our current ordinance totally passed. So Keith and I took the ordinance that took the checklist, and we went through it item by item to see if there were any items that our amendments would thus be a problem for. There are 40 some items on the checklist. We found 2 that could vaguely be considered to be a problem with the incidental structures, because it said all development has to be permitted.
Oh,
So we made those incidental structures. We put them in a category we already had called insignificant activities, but we required that they have a zoning administrator permit. They don't have to go to the DRB. That was our compromise, but they're still permitted
In the floodway.
in the floodway. So we feel that that would be able to be checked off the checklist. So the other thing that we found out is that FEMA allegedly occasionally reviews regulations to see if they're compliant. We don't remember that happening in Richmond, and it, according to ANR, only happens when they're going to redo the maps. Supposedly, they're going to redo the maps sometime in the next 15 years. Maybe sooner, because it's been almost 15 years. So at that time, if the procedure is they will review, supposedly, they will review your ordinance, our ordinance, and if there are any deficiencies or problems, then we have 6 months to fix them to remain in good standing with the flood insurance program. So we're still trying to persuade Kyle and Ned that actually what we now have is in compliance. We feel fairly sure that it's in compliance. And the fact that Ned and Kyle just didn't like the language, they thought it was too complicated for FEMA to understand. I mean,
Literally, they said that.
they said that, and we're like, come on, these are smart people at FEMA. They probably can understand it. But anyway, so we can't say 100%. But the other thing that Kyle and Ned said was, even if we say that it looks good, FEMA could disagree. So, you know, even their blessing is not necessarily enough to say that this is the perfect language. They put out a model ordinance. Our currently in place ordinance, I believe, we haven't proved this, was based on a model ordinance from years back, because, for instance, towns like Huntington, you can see the same language in it. So I'm sure we didn't make this language up. We based it on a model ordinance. Their model ordinance is now simpler. It doesn't even have a section about nonconformities in it, which is sort of a problem for us with the approach that we're taking. But they want ours to look just like theirs. That's all that we can figure. And then they have these certain words like structure that they want us to use their words. What we have done is every time we use the word structure in our amended, we're working on the amended version of the amendments, we put structures that are buildings or structures that aren't buildings. You know, we make it clear we're using structure the way we want to have it because that's the way it is in the whole rest of our ordinance. But we're saying, for instance, relative to the playground equipment, these are structures that aren't buildings. So
No, I understand, but if you don't mind, to sort of cut to the chase, it sounds like the
Yeah.
question is, how important is it when push comes to shove? You know, if we have to go to FEMA to, you know, apply for reimbursement because we've had a flood, how important is it for A&R to be comfortable with what we did? And, you know, at that point, is FEMA going to be going to A&R and say, so what about these guys in Richmond?
Well, I'm going to go ahead and chime in.
Yeah.
You know, really the baseline that I want to get out of this, Chris, is a thumbs up from A&R that we are compliant with NFIP.
Yeah.
That's all I want. And then we're satisfied with that. And I think we're working towards that. I think we were just about there with them. They just are not comfortable with our language because it can be confusing. It is, you know, kind of a bolted on language to the model ordinance that began all this. But it is what it is. And for us to change it to their model ordinance that they have just promulgated back in 2023, I don't see that happening. That's just gonna, the thread that gets pulled from that is just not worth it. So the bottom line is, to wrap up, is what I want is a thumbs up from A&R that we are compliant with the NFIP.
Yeah, I just want to be clear, that's what I want too, and I don't think that means necessarily, you know, replicating what A&R has done. You know, we're our own situation, but I think that if we don't get that thumbs up, I think we have to be, well, I'd be uncomfortable about giving something to the select board that doesn't have that thumbs up.
Yes, we're cognizant of that, and we'll have something in writing from them at some point that, you know, in their comments. But I need to have them focus on that one question. And that is, as promulgated, these revisions, is it compliant with the NFIP? And that's really the only thing I want from them.
Sounds good.
They took it upon themselves to move in different directions with that, but, you know, I'll try to get them to focus on that going forward.
and we did find language in the FEMA regulations, all 583 pages of them, which says that this is just the baseline. You can do more than this, and it can be particular to your town.
You can be
We
specific.
have a quote that we're giving to ANR that says, you can make it specific to your town.
Good.
So,
Good.
you know, we have a few things that we've picked out that we're,
But I agree, Chris. I mean, we definitely don't want to give this to the select board and without A&R's blessing. I mean,
Good.
I
Yeah,
don't think I'd want to put them,
that was the only thing I just wanted to check
Yeah.
about. Yeah.
I wouldn't want to put them in that position at all. Okay.
okay, any other comments? I don't see anyone here from the Three Parks Committee. Mark, do you have any comments you want to make?
Yeah, no, I'm absolving myself of any conversation that has to do with this zoning reg.
Okay. Anybody else?
I'm looking at you. Do you want to comment?
No, I mean, what we can do here is we can continue the public hearing, or we can close the public hearing and continue to work before we have, to deliberate on the information, especially that we've recently received from ANR, to make a version that they're comfortable with. So either one of those motions would be fine if no one else has anything to add to this conversation.
I motion to continue to deliberate on language that would ultimately get approved.
By the planning commission.
Okay, so do you want to close the public hearing, Rebecca? I mean, in a way, closing the public hearing, it doesn't mean that people can't come anyway, and our meetings are always open to people to come and give their opinion, and I don't know that there's any benefit one way or the other, is there, Keith, between continuing with the public hearing? We're obviously going to continue to work on it. We haven't arrived at a version that we can approve for transmittal to the select board yet, and we won't do that until we're finished with these negotiations. So
Do you want to keep this open to, what did we say, February 5th?
yeah, do you want to resolve, do you want to move, Rebecca, to keep the public hearing open until the 5th of February?
Yeah, I mean, I guess honestly, I'm thinking it in terms of, people kind of spinning their wheels when the language is going to change anyways, based on feedback we've gotten.
Right. Well, if we keep the public hearing open and we have new language for our next meeting, then the public might want to look at the new language.
Okay.
So,
Yep. But I mean, the hope is that we can get the thumbs up from A&R on by the 5th. I mean, I will endeavor to make sure we get that one way or another. And then hopefully we can, on the 5th, transmit this final product to the select board.
okay. So there's a motion on the floor by Rebecca to continue the public hearing till the 5th of February. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Allison is seconding it. Any further discussion on the motion? Okay, not seeing any. So all in favor of continuing the public hearing and including the work that we're doing on this document until the 5th of February should say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Okay. And Rebecca, we're assuming you're voting aye. Mark are you abstaining, Mark, or are you voting no?
Oh, yes.
Or yes? Or what?
Sorry about that. I thought I was unmuted. I am abstaining.
Okay. So Mark abstains. Okay, so that motion passes. We will continue this discussion and have further information for you on the 2nd of February. I will also vote aye. All right, great. So let's go on to item number 7 on our agenda. If you recall, at our last meeting, we gave conceptual approval to the documents related to the Jolina Court zoning district, and said when the documents, there were a few minor changes that we agreed on then. When the documents were finalized, we would be able to approve them for our public hearing. So that's what we've got in front of us. We've got those 3 documents, the Jolina Court zoning district amendments. We've got the density bonus program section of the zoning, which is a freestanding section that will apply to the whole document. And we have the affordable housing program that comes directly from Act 47 and 181. That is now, since July, has been the law, but we haven't had it in our zoning. So that is also a freestanding section. So those 3 sections, we would like to see if there are any final comments before we set a public hearing date, which we are thinking probably March 5th for. And we would also like to talk a bit about something that I think Chris suggested, that we have different members of the commission talk about the way we got here, talk about why this is a compromise document on different points of view and the different goods. So anyway, does anyone have anything that they want to say about these documents?
I have a couple of short things, but I want to let other people go first.
Yep.
I just have a typo correction in section 391.
Okay.
After the first line out, the district will contribute to be a vibrant, dynamic town center, or contribute to a. Maybe I was just reading it wrong the first time I took it. It looked weird, but I guess that reads as it is because it's contributing to a broader town center.
So where are you looking? 3.9.1 purpose?
Under purpose.
Yeah, right after the first strikeout. That sentence I thought was talking about the district, but really it's what it's saying is contributing. The district will contribute to a broader.
To a vibrant,
That's
to a
good.
vibrant and dynamic town center.
Yeah, so it actually reads well. I apologize. I had a note to say something when I first read it, and
So it's okay.
I just read it wrong myself. It looks good.
Okay. All right. Any other comments or concerns? Let's see, I guess. Oh, one change that I think that we had was that so the residential density bonus plus the base density equals the total residential density. And we wanted to make sure that it said 20 units per developable acre. Does it say 20 units? Because we had 24 in there at one point and
What's the site section?
it's 3.9.4.
49.4
Maximum
base residential density is one dwelling unit.
Maximum base residential is 1 dwelling unit per 2,904 square feet, 1/15 of an acre. Then the residential density bonus units can be allowed in addition to the
Yes.
base density, not to exceed a maximum total residential density of 20 units.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
Specific.
So that was one thing that we wanted to make sure was what we had determined. And everybody liked that number, so that's okay.
Compromise.
And I don't know that there were any other changes. Any other comments about anything of these 3 sections?
Okay, if nobody else does, I've got a couple small ones.
Okay, yeah,
6.15.5.
15.5, okay, we're in the residential density bonus program.
Yeah, let's
6.1.
see.
Requirements for accessible/adaptable dwelling units.
See, what was the thing? Oh, I think it's actually 16.15.5.4. And maybe there are references in other parts of the section to the Americans with Disabilities Act, but we only have the acronym here.
Okay,
Is that and if there's not, what I would suggest is rather than saying ADA width, let's just say what the width is as stated in the American with Disabilities Act.
okay. State the width, we can look that up.
Yeah, just I think it'll make it easier for
Yeah.
people to interpret. 16 point. Also, I guess that's that same section. This is nitpicking, but instead of elevator, if dwelling unit is above ground floor, I think what we want to say is that the dwelling unit must be accessible by elevator if it's
Okay,
above the ground
what
floor.
number are you in?
6.15.5.3b.
Okay,
Elevator if dwelling units above ground floor required features for the building containing a dwelling. Elevator is
so
If
dwelling unit shall be accessible by elevator if above the,
yeah,
we can do that.
it's sort of
Dwelling,
it's a sentence fragment now. That's like I said, it's just nitpicking.
yeah,
And then the last thing, this is more of a question, and I probably asked this before, and you probably answered it before, but 6.15.5.4H, why a pocket door to the bathroom?
probably for maneuverability. I think that's a
well,
recommendation too.
and it's also for safety sake, apparently. It's in a list of things that are required, but apparently you can, if you fall or something in the bathroom and you fall against the door,
Ah,
then you can't open it from the outside properly. So,
I'd never heard of it. I'm familiar with having to have the bathroom doors wide enough to accommodate a wheelchair.
right. Yeah, and I couldn't tell you how necessary that is. I haven't spoken to a lot of handicapped accessible people, advocates as to how essential that is. So whether we want to put that in or not,
That's a requirement, yeah.
as a requirement, I mean, it could be encouraged, or it was just on, it's one of those things that from the SASH people came this list of things that are,
And
We're
for
covered.
full disclosure, Chris, I don't believe you had mentioned that before, so.
Okay. Yeah, no, and I have no expertise in this area. It just stood out to me. I know enough to know that those are not inexpensive to install. And like I said, I'd only heard of the width of the door being the issue, not the means. But, you know, if you've got a good reference for it, Virginia, let's, you know, I'm not opposing it, I guess what I'm
yeah,
saying.
okay. Well, why don't I look into that a little bit and see if, you know, the accessible advocates are really strong about it or not. And if they're not, we can take it out. Everybody's good with that.
Be an additional cost too. Not by much. Usually, I mean, most doors are pre-hung. I mean, those have to be like constructed. And done it.
Yeah. Okay,
And that's
all
it.
right. Anything else?
Nope.
Okay. Great. All right, anybody else want to talk about any of the,
I just wanted to circle back on Chris's excellent point that ADA isn't defined in our regs. And I didn't know if we're revising the
Mhm.
definition section, but maybe that would be a good thing to put in. I'm surprised it's not in use anywhere else in the regulations, and it isn't, but I could see how it would have pertinence in a planning document.
Yeah. So would you be okay if we just put the width in, if we just found out what the width was and put it in, or would you?
If you want to find that out, I just worry the ADA might change. I mean, I know it's a law and it takes literally an act of Congress to change.
Right,
But I can find out the number, yeah, but I still think we ought to put a reference to what ADA is and with some sort of most current regulations reference in that definition.
okay.
I agree, that would be the preferred way of doing it.
Where are you? Well, not there. I mean, there's some call outs in the zoning regs of ADA, though it's all over the place, but you're right, it's not defined. Surprising.
Hmm.
I say that tongue in cheek.
Okay. All right,
Adaptive uses, I see, so that's interesting.
okay, so we can do that. Any other big or little things? All right, so if no one has any other comments, I would be looking for a motion to set up a public hearing date for these three documents.
And we did we throw out the 5th of March? Or the-
Yeah, the 5th of March seems to be a good date. We've got, you know, the 5th of February, we're going to finish up on the flood hazard overlay district. And the 19th of February, we're going to have to do our baseline town plan program and timeline. And also that's a date that the regional planning people want to come and talk to us about coordinating their new mapping strategy, which they are required to do by law now by Act 181, how to coordinate that with our town plan work and talk about the NDA question, which we briefly had an introduction to. But so that would be the 19th of February. So the next meeting would be the 5th of March. So if someone would like to make a motion to set up a public hearing for these documents, that would be great.
I would like to make a motion to set a public hearing date for revisions to sections 1.152, excuse me. Yeah, 1.1525, section 3.9, section 6.15 and section 6.16.
Okay, that sounds good. Is there a second to that?
Well, I'll second it.
Love the hand.
Yeah,
Allison,
I'll second it. Yeah, fine.
Allison's disembodied hand. We can't really see you, Allison, but we can see your
Well,
hand.
maybe I just need to adjust my.
There you go.
That back. I am here.
Yay.
We were
Your hand
admiring
is
your
attached.
ceiling, Allison.
Oh, really?
Can see you now. Okay.
Well,
Is there any further discussion on that motion? If not, all in favor of it should say aye or raise your hand, whichever you wish.
I raise
All
hand.
right. Mark, you're voting for it, I take it.
Aye.
There
Yes.
you go. That's unanimous. Okay. All right. So what do you want to do about having these little presentations? I think, Chris, you proposed this idea. Do you want to talk about it? Whether, you know, like you could talk about affordable housing and Mark could talk about parking and Ian could talk about just housing in general. Maybe Allison, you could talk about flooding. Rebecca, I don't know what you'd want to talk about, but you have your hand up. Do you want to talk first? Rebecca, you have a comment?
Oh, no, sorry. I'm just touching my face.
Your hand is raised in
Is
the,
it?
in the
Oh,
screen.
okay. Sorry.
Okay.
So, I guess the thinking about it was that, you know, putting myself in the select board shoes, what we're bringing them is something that is a little different than they're going to see in towns surrounding us, and a little and new, and may come across as complicated. And I think it would be, I think they would appreciate it if we explained a little bit of how we got here as a committee. Also, it's a chance for us to show that as a committee, we're behind what we're proposing and to explain our rationale. So, you know, I don't think we have to do a big song and dance about it, but, you know, 5-10 minutes on each point, I think will go a long way.
Okay, so you would be willing to talk about the affordable housing component?
I would.
Okay. Ian, would you be willing to talk for a few minutes about how we need housing in general?
Sure.
Mhm.
All right, that was easy, Zell.
Yeah.
And Mark, you want to talk about parking? The parking question, why we have parking in here,
density
which nobody
bonus?
else has in any other zoning.
Right. You mean the density bonus component of public parking?
Exactly.
Why
Yep.
that?
Yeah, so this is the density bonus. We have the different kinds of bonuses and one of them is parking. Why do we have that? Or, you know, whatever.
Yeah, I think it'd be a pretty short conversation, but yeah, I'd be happy to explain that.
And
Okay.
Virginia, will you do accessibility?
Somebody want to talk about accessible?
No.
You mean like for disabled and handicapped?
Right. So
Okay.
Rebecca, you weren't in on the whole beginning part of this process, but when we decided that instead of just giving Jolina Court the ability to have more density, which will be to Ian's point of just having more housing, which we are short of available housing, we developed this density bonus program where they could have more density, but in return, they would have to provide this added bonus for the town, which could consist of 3 things that have been talked about by residents in our housing study. One of them being affordable housing, because not only do we not have available housing, but we don't have affordable housing. So Chris is going to address that. A second one is the residents, the older residents would like there to be senior housing so they can move out of their bigger houses, free them up, and go to someplace that is suitable, that needs to be accessible
Mhm.
for, you know, it could be for anybody who has physical handicaps, limitations, but they would be especially suitable for seniors. And they could charge, you know, what they wanted to. Jolina Court could charge what they thought they were worth, but they could advertise them as ready for senior living. We just can't use the word senior for various reasons, but anyway, they're accessible. So why is that important? It is because residents in Richmond have requested there to be places that are suitable to be moving to later in life, or, you know, if you have some kind of physical limitation.
Do we have records or data on the residents that are requesting this? Or is it relatively anecdotal?
Well, from our housing study that was done in 2022, the Housing Committee, it's anecdotal because the consultant who we employed for that study interviewed people, and, you know, she had focus groups and interviewed residents. So
Okay.
that's, I would say, the extent of it.
Okay.
So, and if you don't want to do it, that's fine too. I mean, you haven't really had.
I'm wondering what other topics
Deep
there are,
history.
because I guess I'm just putting a lens on like me talking about housing, accessible housing, or how accessible domains, for lack of a better word, for later in life. Does that come across as I don't know what I'm talking about because I'm not there yet? Or does it matter?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it
Okay.
depends how you put it, I guess. If you don't want to do it, then that's okay. That's fine, because you haven't really been involved in the whole thing. So maybe it's a bit premature to get you to be
I'm
out there.
happy to do it. I'm very used to presenting, and I'm happy to do it. I guess because I'm new at this, I'm trying to put myself in that spot and wondering what the audience will think, or am I overthinking it? Which I very might well be.
I think you're overthinking it a little bit. I mean, I think
Okay.
if you say from this housing study, and if you get a copy of the housing study, we'll get you a copy of the housing
Okay.
report, and you can look through that. And if you think there's enough material that you can confidently say, this is what has been requested in Richmond, then you can go for it. Otherwise, it's not crucial.
Okay.
Hmm.
Okay.
That be the Richmond Housing Study 2022
That would be it.
coming your way.
All
All
right.
right.
Thank
You
you.
know, is there a resource for like vacancy rates in Richmond?
I don't know.
For Airbnbs, yeah, that's another story.
That is.
Well, that would be an
That's not around the
interesting
pipe.
statistic also, like how many Airbnbs are there, you know?
Oh,
Not
boy.
many in our town, but I mean, there are some.
There
I
are
mean, it's
some.
not like there's none.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if regional planning would have that.
I don't know.
Vacancy rates.
Yeah.
You know,
don't-
regional planning certainly has the data on how many units we're going to be expected to have as a goal to put in Richmond, which is way more than we're ever going to be able to put in Richmond in the next 5 years. But,
Yeah.
you know, there's that data.
Do we have a rental registry?
No,
I know that's a thing like in Winooski and Burlington, but
Not anything that we're tracking, no.
No.
so we don't have any real good data on the rental market in town.
No, we don't. I mean, we have good data on housing stock and
Just in
apartment
general.
stock, but just in general, correct.
Yep.
We don't have.
And I don't think these little segments that have to be too technical,
Yeah.
you know, I mean,
Okay.
if you've got the technical bits, then that's great. But otherwise, it's
Yeah.
like, have a housing crisis. We know this because we read 7 Days. We have a housing
Yeah,
crisis.
It'd be
Yeah.
nice
You
to
know?
have a little data to kind of speak from,
Yeah.
you know.
Well,
But I can look into that a little bit.
and the housing
know that.
committee does have some resources on their page, in their spreadsheet. I don't know if we can get you that information, but yeah, it would be great. And it would be great to have everybody on the commission be saying something. So
Are there any other
Um,
topics? So we've got accessibility, affordable housing, housing in general. Is there anything else that needs to be spoken about?
Well, not at this stage, because
Okay.
those were the three that sort of emerged from a long discussion about
Right.
density bonuses.
Okay.
On the committee, so.
yep, I mean, certainly at some point there will be many other topics that you can talk about. So, and we would have Allison talk about flooding, but this is not in the flood hazard area, so I don't think we want to bring that up for this
That's a good
particular
thing.
topic, right?
Right.
So, okay, so if people could just kind of be thinking about that, work it up a little bit. If you have a problem, just let us know, and
Got a
you know,
month and a half- I got almost 2 months to.
yeah, you have till the 5th of March.
Rebecca,
Okay,
I
I'll get to work on that on the 4th. And I'll get back to you.
You were one of those people who wrote the paper on the last night before it was due and stayed up all night.
Yeah, that's my mom. She'll tell you all about it.
I sent that report to you,
Yep,
on
I got it.
your Dell account, okay.
Great. Yeah, and the housing committee is a good
We're getting up and running.
reference to work with. So anyway, all right. So that is it for that. We'll schedule that for the 5th. So we can go on to agenda item unless anybody has anything else to say about that. We'll make those little tiny changes in the documents. We'll go on to number 8, updates and other business, since we have time.
You do.
Keith is going to review the outcome of the select board public hearing on the village residential neighborhoods, which we finally had with the select board
Good.
from last Monday or a week ago Monday.
Yep, the VRNs have been approved. There was one minor change to the definition for impervious surfaces.
Mhm.
And that was to remove any reference to natural rocks, is it, or something?
Natural stone
Natural
surfaces
stone
as being
surfaces
impervious.
As being impervious, even though they are, but we went back and forth on that, and we struck that one item and went with the definition that A&R had for it, I believe it was.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
some state definition, which is almost identical to ours, but it didn't involve the words natural
Natural
stone,
stone,
which we
right.
put in there as a stormwater issue because natural stone is actually an impervious surface. But currently, the people in the Southview residents are involved with discussing impervious surfaces because of this new 3-acre rule about stormwater. And they didn't want any changes in the words, in the definitions that they were under negotiation
Right.
about right now. So that was fine.
So that was the one minor change that the select board requested. We'll do that. We have 21 days from approval by the legislative body, which was the select board. It was unanimously approved. That will go live on the 29th of this month. So that's really the update on that. Went relatively smoothly that one meeting. So that was a stacked up meeting too.
Right.
Yeah, we had a lot of items on that.
Yeah, and the issue there, if you recall, they had sent it back to us to put in the Act 181 changes about the 3 and 4 unit buildings. So finally, I was able to get hold of Jana Brown, our representative. Actually, I got hold of her, but she was busy over the whole of the holidays, so it was only the day before that hearing on the 6th, that she fixed up a conversation between her and Keisha Ram Hinsdale, who was in the state legislature. She was involved in writing this legislation. And Keisha said that during this session, they are going to be reviewing that, and they are going to be interested in testimony from towns, like from us, because when I explained what our village residents were concerned about with the 3 to 4 unit buildings being able to be built on a 0.2 acre lot and having that market of starter homes, single family homes disappear. Keisha said, well, that was a scenario that they hadn't really considered.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they were thinking about the big towns like Winooski and Burlington and South Burlington and Essex. So
Yeah.
she said she was sure that it was going to come up. She would like to have testimony. So, you know, if any of us want to testify or residents, there was some discussion about whether we should have a coordinated response with the select board, you know, so that if Richmond was presenting a point of view, we should make sure that it was what
Right.
Richmond wanted to present as a point of view, not just random people. So that's all to be worked out. And, you know, they have a lot of things to do. The legislature right now, they're looking at taxes and education and what have you. So it probably won't be within the next couple of months that they take this up. But anyway, the select board basically said what we said, which is it's law right now. We have to have it in our regulations so that full transparency to people who want to do something here, they would be judged on what the state law is. So that's going to happen.
So I guess in closing, I think that was a monumental win, so to speak, is to finally get that through the select board. And you know, I thought, you know, at the end of the day, administration wise, I really think it's a good document. So kudos for what it's worth.
Good.
And we had no members of those districts come and talk at that hearing. So,
Interesting.
Kathleen did.
oh, Kathleen
Kathleen
did.
Yeah, but-
I forget what she said, but
I'm not sure.
you know, I think they were resigned to the fact that this is the state law and it is going to be in effect until it is not in effect anymore. But
Hmm.
anyway, Keisha Ram Hinsdale did say they were going to take it up again, so I'll be keeping you all posted on that.
Yep.
Okay, so that's that. And then the next item on the updates and other business, schedule the CCRPC meeting for the NDA review. One, Keith and I have had a brief meeting with them about this, and they're possibly thinking that it's not even useful for us to go for the NDA because, well, it's a long story,
It
but
is.
basically the districts that we would be putting into the NDA, those districts anyway are going to have the same results when the new mapping system is resolved. But anyway.
Yeah, and I believe
We'll
there was about
talk
a
about that.
4-month window of opportunity.
Yeah, there was a
And-
4-month window of opportunity. If we had a developer in one of those districts, the VRNS, the VRNN, the Village RC, if there was a developer in the 4-month period that it was in effect before the new system was in effect,
Right.
then they would be able to gather the benefits, the Act 250 exemptions and so on. But we don't anticipate that that is going to actually happen in a 4-month window.
Right.
So anyway, we'll
It's
try
kind-
to talk about it a little bit more clearly. I mean, it was kind of odd that they really recommended that we do this so that we would be transitioned automatically into the new system. And now they're saying, well, it's not going to make that much difference. So
Yeah,
anyway, it does tie in somewhat with our introduction to our town plan work. Because in our town plan, our own town plan work, we have to make sure that we're thinking about the districts that, you know, and how we want them to fit into the new mapping system. A lot of this comes about through Act 181. They're required to make a lot of changes. We're required to make some changes. So, but we do have a timeline. We'll talk about the timeline for the town plan work. We'll talk about how everybody here on the planning commission is going to have to be involved to some extent in the town plan work. Whether it's standing at a farmer's market table, we are required by law to have meaningful outreach. What that is not defined, but so we will gonna look for suggestions. How are we going to have this meaningful outreach? How are we gonna reach people? I've already started by reaching out to the committees that we have to look at the goals in the old town plan and see which ones they've done. We did this back in 21 once, but we're doing it again, and you know, what new goals. And so if you all can be thinking about like which sections might you be interested in thinking about, there are 10 sections to the plan. They're going to have to be all considered as to what new things we would like to have in the plan and what old things we can get rid of out of the plan. So something must have happened over the last 8 years that we can change. And then this is for the next 8 years. So
Yeah,
anyway, we'll try to have a coherent discussion on that on the 19th.
mhm.
Then at some point we want to schedule this discussion about the trails. I don't have a date for that at the moment.
that's gonna be fun.
Yeah, interested in that, so we'll, you know, it looks like it's gonna be after March, because we're pretty full up to March.
Yeah,
But it's gonna be really helpful to us with the town plan stuff, which is gonna be a big, kind of a big project. If we can finish these 3 things that are on our plate. One is the VRNs, we got that done. Flood hazard overlay district, that's the next one, if we can move it to the select board, and then the Jolina Court district. If we can get those off our agenda, then it will be helpful to working on the town plan stuff that we have this 1 year to do pretty much. All right. Anybody want to say anything else? We're pretty early, so
yeah, that's the agenda, isn't it?
yes.
We talk about timelines for the town plan update?
The timeline for the town plan, we're going to talk about on the 19th.
Okay.
And on the 19th, we're also going to have our organizational meeting. It's always done in March. So be thinking about if you want to run for chair, vice chair, anything like that. We will talk about the code of ethics that everybody is required to sign once a year. And that will be our organizational meeting.
How, in the past, like, what are some carrots that committees use to get people to contribute to such planning and decision making?
Well,
Or is it
there's-
just, you know, we put out the word and they either come or they don't?
Yeah, there's multiple avenues that we'll be going down and that you try to go down. I think at some point we'll have what is known as a charrette here, which is a dedicated maybe 2-day opportunity for people to come in and out of the town offices with maps all over the place. That's a typical thing that we would do. Thinking of a mailer
Yeah,
or a postcard. Obviously Front Porch Forum. We discuss it at the select board as often as we can, because that is the body of town that typically gets the most people to show up. And you know, this committee also is a huge aspect of that. A table at the farmer's market, I think is huge. I
Once a
think that's
month.
huge. And,
So Rebecca, was your question about getting the planning commissioners involved or getting the other committees in town and commissions involved?
No, just community contribution, right?
Yep. We're also working on a list of all the people and the committees who might have something relevant to say about each section. So there are 10 sections to the plan. Let's take, for instance, community development. So I'm keeping this list, and so we can talk about this when we have our introduction to the town plan work. What names do you know of people who would be good to put on that list? You know, the energy section. Well, we have the Richmond Climate Action Committee. We have some other people. We have Chris Granda, for instance, who would be good to talk about the energy section. In community development, library, recreation, you know, who are the people who are going to be important there? There's an emergency resilience section. I was thinking about Susan Whitman, who did all that organizing, you know, for after the flood, who just took it upon herself to organize a list of people who had resources, people who needed resources. I mean, she would be somebody who we can talk to. So we're generating this list of everybody who might be involved for each one of the 10 sections. That's
If
one.
I can add a little bit to that too, just based on the experience from last time, what I liked that we did last time was, and you've probably heard this before, Rebecca, there's probably, you know, anecdotally, there's 100 people in town who are actively involved in the government. And reaching out to them and their network of contacts is important. But I also think that for the town plan, it's important to go to people who are not
Yes.
actively involved and to go to where they are. I believe I can't remember exactly where we did neighborhood sessions, but I think we did one at Riverview Commons. And I think we did sessions in other neighborhoods as well. And I would encourage us to do that again.
Yeah, and I mean, that's exactly kind of the trail of thinking I was on. You know, I was thinking maybe we team up with Friday Food Affair, right?
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Or I don't know, in the summer, have some kind of fun thing at the volunteer green, right? Where we put the carrot out, right? Where we attract people to come, but we're also there with kind of the brainstorming and the planning and educating people as they mingle and have fun.
I think that's right on target.
Yeah, and I actually belong to a nonprofit that I've kind of been going through my head about this because I don't think there's a conflict of interest because it's a bridge building, community building nonprofit, and I'm given a budget, and we could fund an activity like that through that budget that I have.
Can you share which nonprofit you're with?
It's called More Perfect Union.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, keep in mind, my department does have a planning budget too, so we can help with costs too, so.
Okay.
That's specific to that, and I'm thinking that Brown's Court, which will probably have all the pickleball courts and everything done by July of next year, cross our fingers. Boy, wouldn't that be a great time to break a table out also, yeah, just thinking.
Yeah, well, all of these are great ideas. All that they require is that somebody do them.
Time.
You know what I mean? So if it's gonna be us, it's gonna have to be all of us, and we're gonna have to commit to doing some of these things, you know, to making the time to doing them, because,
Weekend specific.
you know, like farmer's market, we could have one once a month. We could have a table at the farmer's market, talk about a different topic. you know,
Yeah.
but somebody has to be there and it's not gonna be me all the time.
You know, the last time I recall, Chris, you were on the town plan steering committee.
Yep.
I mean, like the whole thing with questionnaires and,
Oh, yeah,
I mean, you remember all that?
I do.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
that's a avenue, but that was a lot of work.
Yeah, but we shouldn't
Yeah.
kid ourselves. I think to do the town plan in a way that it really reflects the visions and hopes and expectations of the town is a lot of work. And we
Yeah.
got 4,000 people out there.
Yeah.
So,
And the
Yeah.
2018 plan did all that work and it did a lot of visioning and stuff ahead of time, and then the whole plan had to be rewritten, but you know, so I don't think there are gonna be any big basic changes, you
Right.
know, we're just gonna need to add action items and
Right.
we're gonna need to take away the ones we've already done and
Updated.
update it, basically.
Yeah.
Some people do think there's gonna be a lot more work, but I look at those vision statements and they're still true, you know, people
Yeah.
still want the same thing. It's just how are we gonna get there? You know, what are the actions gonna be? Allison, you had your hand up.
I did. My brain was kind of buzzing here, thinking of how I might be able to contribute. And I have for a number of years had the senior citizens have a couple of lunchtime swimming days that they could come, and I find that they come and a lot of the town problems get solved at my pool. And
Right.
in these things, I was going to say that I would be glad to offer an event at the swimming pool. It could be also a picnic or something to invite people to come and just, you know, make it a social thing, but also with the idea that we're interested in the future of our town. Or I'll offer that.
That would be unique. That would be really unique.
I like it.
And, you know, it would require some planning though, because like anything else,
Mhm.
it's the questions you ask, you know, or
Or how they're asked.
how they're asked, when you get the answers that you need to actually put something in writing. And of course, the town plan has to be voted on. So
Yeah.
it can't necessarily, it's more general than the zoning, for instance, you know, it has a lot of ideas in it and stuff. But anyway, we'll come to your pool.
No, it's amazing how many problems get solved at my pool. I'm astounded by it just in experience. I'm not crediting the pool. It's just the idea of
Right.
people coming together in for a sport or for something that's fun, and
Right.
they're not thinking about it as being a serious meeting that we're going to solve these problems at, but the
Right.
problems come up and they
Mhm.
get discussed. And
Yeah.
well, I'm all for having fun, you know, whenever you can. If you can attach fun to any of these things, if they seem too terribly serious, with the number of challenges that we have had in our state and in Richmond, particularly because our topography is so prone to vulnerability, having trouble with the floods and all. I think that the more humor and the more social kinds of fun things that we can do, get people together, and they will automatically talk about these things.
Yep. Great. And on a slightly related topic, I think we need to have a banner that we're going to use at these farmers market tables and our charrettes and maybe at the pool with a logo for Town Plan 2026. So if anyone has a good idea for a graphic to put on this banner that says Town Plan 2026,
There
if you want to come up
is
with a logo.
there's a banner that I used to use on 4th of July for a booth I'd set up for the planning commission. And it was actually sketched out by a Richmond resident. The graphics set up. It's really cool looking. It's got all the principal buildings in a banner that should be kicking around.
Mhm.
the offices. It's probably right behind you. Or
Okay.
it's in the closet downstairs.
We can look for that and maybe transport that logo onto a town plan twenty
Updated
twenty-six.
here, absolutely.
Graphic.
But it's a really cool logo. I think you'd like it.
Okay, cool. Great. We'll look for it. All right, anybody else have anything else they want to say?
I think
If-
we're looking at that logo right on your name placards right now, aren't we?
Well, that's on the front of the town
Town plan,
plan.
yeah.
Yeah,
Mark Hughes drew that back in,
Yeah, that's right.
I think.
I mean, we could
2017 or
put that on. That's the previous logo.
It's not geographically accurate though, because the round church isn't really next to the church there.
No, it's just
Town-
they're all lined up. You don't like it?
You
Okay,
don't want so much.
well,
It's not factually correct.
Right, no, not geographically correct.
and it's not new,
Be on the
exciting, but
too, so. and then
anyway,
check it
I
for
like it.
work.
I like to.
bring your ideas and your energy. So we could have a motion to adjourn.
I
Okay.
would like to move that we adjourn.
Okay,
Second.
by
I
Chris,
second that emotion.
Ian.
Fantastic.
All right, all in favor of, well, let's say, is there anyone who does not want to adjourn?
Actually, you know what?
We're going-
Just
That's funny.
1 second, did we lose Dan Wolfson who was here earlier? Did we know what he was here for?
Probably
Nope.
the trails.
Probably the trails, yeah,
He
okay,
left early on, so
okay.
is he on the Conservation Commission or the AFC Commission? I think he's on the ACF Commission, the ACF, the Andrews Forest
Oh,
Group.
right, okay,
He's a member of that group.
okay,
And they're the ones who are having the most trouble with this
gotcha.
issue. So, okay, so I'm going to consider it unanimous because there's no disagreement. And great, thanks for coming. And we will see you all next time.
Good night.
All right, everybody.
Okay.
Good night. Bye-bye.
See you next month.